This is a tale of two very different Republican politicians. On the one hand, you have former Republican Congresswoman and lifelong conservative Liz Cheney, who just gave her bluntest interview yet about the threat posed to the United States by Donald Trump, Mike Johnson, and the current Republican Party. And then on the other hand, you have her exact opposite, the cowardly Republican senator, ex-Trump critic turned Trump sycophant, Lindsey Graham, who then tried to downplay Liz Cheney's warnings in his subsequent interview. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. Okay, folks, I have several clips to play. This is many clips, and most of them are about Liz Cheney. But before we jump into those, I just want to set the stage because one of the criticisms that Liz Cheney gets from the right, from the MAGA cult, is that she's a rhino, a Republican in name only. She was never a Republican. She was never a conservative. She was never a Trump supporter. And so I just want to briefly and utterly debunk this, okay? 538 tracks how Congress people vote during certain presidencies, during all presidencies. So right now, President Biden is in charge, so you can find out how any congressperson, Republican or Democrat, how often they vote with the president and down like a bill by bill by bill basis. You can also do that for Trump. So Matt Gaetz, who is one of the most strident Trump supporters, even now, we can look back and he voted with Donald Trump 85% of the time. Pretty formidable. You can go to Jim Jordan, who's also a strident Trump supporter, and he voted with Donald Trump about 89% of the time, right? Liz Cheney tops them all. When she was in Congress and Donald Trump was president, she voted with Donald Trump. She voted to support Donald Trump's agenda 93% of the time, okay? So it is simply a fact, and facts don't care about your feelings, gang. Liz Cheney, when it came to things that mattered most, her vote was more of a Trump supporter than Matt Gaetz or Jim Jordan. Let that sink in. Now, having established that, let's play some clips from her most recent interview. This was with CBS Sunday Morning, in which she bluntly describes, the most blunt she's ever been, the threat posed to the U.S. by Trump, by Speaker Mike Johnson, and by the Republican Party.
You say Donald Trump, if he is reelected, it will be the end of the republic. What do you mean?
He's told us what he will do. It's very easy to see the steps that he will take. People who say, well, if he's elected, it's not that dangerous because we have all of these checks and balances, don't fully understand the extent to which the Republicans in Congress today have been co-opted. One of the things that we see happening today is a sort of a sleepwalking into dictatorship.
So before I play the next clip, I just really want to emphasize this because this is the argument to the contrary of what Liz Cheney just said is pure cope from bad faith Republicans who are either, again, just trying to deceive themselves and others, or they're just stupid. The civic institutions of the United States are not divinely crafted nor divinely enforced. They are enforced by reciprocal good faith from people. And if the people running these institutions are loyal to Donald Trump more than the Constitution or democracy, those institutions can fall. That's how institutions in every democracy or in every state fell. The idea that the United States is somehow above it is insane. It's dangerous. And, I mentioned Ben Shapiro earlier. He constantly regurgitates this argument to launder the threat that Trump poses. Well, the guardrails held. Guardrails have to be repaired and reinforced after somebody plows a car into them. Okay, this idea that we wouldn't do that and that we would get the person who deliberately plowed the car in the first place to get a second crack at it is insane. Okay, it's just utterly bad faith. It's a stupid argument. She is 100% correct. We've talked about this when we've discussed the Project 2025 that the Republican Party and the Heritage Foundation are trying to unveil. They are trying to staff institutions and organs of federal government with Trump loyalists. This is incredibly dangerous. It can't be downplayed. Anyone who says otherwise is a liar or an idiot. So let's play the next clip.
One of the things that we see happening today is sort of a sleepwalking into dictatorship in the United States.
Donald Trump a fascist?
I think that he certainly is employing fascist techniques. I think that the tools that he's using are tools that we've seen used by authoritarians, fascists, tyrants around the world. The things that he has said and done in some ways are so outrageous that we have become numb to them. What I believe is the cause of our time is that we not become numb.
She's right. We talked about this before. All of us to one extent or another have graded Trump on a curve. Oh, that's Trump. Oh, that's Trump, because you just become desensitized to it. We can't. This is the greatest threat to the United States, at least internally, since the Civil War, arguably even more than that, because at least Abraham Lincoln wasn't trying to single-handedly overthrow the republic. I'll also point out, too, now I got thinking about it, like she mentioned in the previous clip that Congress has been co-opted. It's worth remembering that more than 130, I think it was about 140, members of the United States Congress voted to try to overturn and not certify the results of President Biden's victory in 2020, even after the January 6th insurrection. So she's right. The Republican Party is utterly cowardly. Now I think she turns her focus here to the current speaker, Mike Johnson. So we'll play this clip.
If you look at what Donald Trump is trying to do, he can't do it by himself. He has to have collaborators. And the story of Mike Johnson is the story of a collaborator and of someone who knew then and knows now that what he's doing and saying is wrong, but he's willing to do it in an effort to please Donald Trump. And that's what makes it dangerous.
The Speaker of the House is a collaborator to overthrow the last election.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's not a matter of opinion. I mean, Mike Johnson defended Donald Trump during at least one of his impeachments. He was the architect of a plan to try to overturn the certain electoral college results in certain states. But when she talks about how Mike Johnson knows better, that's not supposition. That's simply fact. You know, in 2015, when Donald Trump was running for office, we actually have Facebook statements, Facebook message statements from Mike Johnson. He says, "The thing about Donald Trump is that he lacks the character and the moral center we desperately need again in the White House," Mike Johnson said in a lengthy post on Facebook on August 7, 2015, before he was elected to Congress and the day after the first Republican primary debate of the campaign cycle. "I'm afraid he would break more things than he fixes. He is a hothead by nature, and that is a dangerous trait to have in a commander-in-chief." Okay? I'm only halfway kidding about this. I just don't think he has the demeanor to be president, because he said if he decided to bomb another head of state merely for disrespecting him. Okay, so Mike Johnson does indeed know better, like many Republicans do. So now Liz Cheney turns her focus not only to Mike Johnson, but the current state of the Republican Party in general.
The Speaker of the House is a collaborator to overthrow the last election.
Absolutely.
What happens if Mike Johnson's the Speaker on the 6th of January, 2025?
He can't be. You know, we're facing a situation with respect to the 2024 election where it's an existential crisis, and we have to ensure that we don't have a situation where an election that might be thrown into the House of Representatives is overseen by a Republican majority.
So you would prefer a Democratic majority?
I believe very strongly in those principles and ideals that have defined the Republican Party. But the Republican Party of today has made a choice, and they haven't chosen the Constitution. And so I do think it presents a threat if the Republicans are in the majority in January 2025.
There's not a single conservative or a single Republican who can refute the logic of what she just said. It's simply a fact. And again, for somebody who not only voted for Trump, but voted with Trump 93% of the time, and who served as a lifelong Republican politician, my God, she's Dick Cheney's daughter, right? I mean, it also echoes what Mitt Romney's recently said in his memoir. Mitt Romney, who used to lead the Republican Party, he was the leader. He was the presidential nominee in 2012 against President Obama. He said he doesn't think his party believes in the Constitution. These are simply matters of fact, right, from principled conservatives, which is very rare to find in the current GOP. Let's play this other clip.
If a person is a member of Congress and they've sworn an oath to defend the Constitution, can they defend the Constitution and also endorse Donald Trump?
No.
So
it's inconsistent.
They're breaking with their oath by saying they would like him to be the next president.
In my view, you know, fundamentally, there is a choice to be made. You can't both be for Donald Trump and for the Constitution. You have to choose.
It's a lot of people who are choosing Donald Trump.
Yeah, it is.
She's right. Donald Trump has repeatedly talked about not only weaponizing the government, he's actively called for the suspension of the Constitution. Can you imagine if a Democrat ever said something like that, what the Republican Party and the mainstream media would do? So she's saying you can't simultaneously support a guy who says he's willing to shred the Constitution and support the Constitution. They are indeed mutually exclusive. And that is true. And again, no conservative commentator and no Republican surrogate can ever refute the logic there. They're screwed no matter what. They always lose the argument. So now that we've established the facts from Liz Cheney, let's go to the cope from Lindsey Graham. He was asked about Liz Cheney's recent remarks, and here's what he has to say.
Senator, before I let you go, I want to ask you about your fellow Republican former Congresswoman Liz Cheney. She has a new book out. She sat down for an interview this weekend, and she said she's worried that the chance of a second Trump presidency means the U.S. is, quote, sleepwalking into a dictatorship. You, of course, have endorsed Donald Trump. What's your reaction?
Yeah. I think a continuation of the Biden presidency would be a disaster for peace and prosperity at home and abroad. Our border's broken. The only person really going to fix a broken border is Donald Trump. When he was president, none of this stuff was going on in Ukraine. You know, Hamas and all these other terrorist groups were afraid of Trump. I think Liz's hatred of Trump is real. I understand why people don't like what he does and says at times, but in terms of actions and results, he was far better president for Biden. And if we have 4 more years of this, Liz Cheney, then we won't recognize America and the world will be truly on fire.
So let's just I've got some more clips to play, but let's just tease this argument out. Let's say that Lindsey Graham is not full of crap, and let's just take it at face value that, listen, when it came to delivering results, let's say Donald Trump was indeed a better president than President Biden. It's not true, but let's just assume it is. I'm a big Star Wars fan, and when I heard the question posed to Lindsey Graham and then his answer, I can't help but think that scene in Revenge of the Sith where, you know, Emperor Palpatine declares himself emperor, and he says he is declaring himself emperor for, you know, peace and a secure society. So it's almost like Lindsey Graham saying, okay, sure, he's a threat to democracy, but he gave us peace, right? And that's incredibly culty and incredibly creepy, even if we take it at face value, this idea that, listen, we should just forego democracy. We should make Donald Trump a dictator if he brings us peace. It's very strange. But of course, we don't have to take Lindsey Graham's argument at face value because he's wrong. Based on the vast majority of metrics, President Biden has been a vastly superior president. And this idea that there were things that didn't happen during the Trump presidency that have happened now, you would have a persuasive case to make, maybe, if you could point to me the things that Donald Trump did to cause these things. I remember watching an eclipse or seeing Donald Trump's, remember that moment when he stared into that eclipse? That eclipse happened during Donald Trump's presidency. As far as I know, we haven't seen an eclipse during the Biden presidency. Maybe we have, maybe we haven't. But the point is, simply because a thing happened or didn't happen when Donald Trump was in office, be it Russia's invasion of Ukraine or a freaking eclipse, doesn't mean that Donald Trump is somehow responsible for it. You actually have to point to things done and said that contributed to the circumstances. And Lindsey Graham, like most conservatives, like most Republican politicians, can't do it. They just appeal to the fact that a thing did or did not happen on Donald Trump's watch as proof that Donald Trump is responsible for it when that doesn't follow. Now, the last clip I want to play here is just remind you of who Lindsey Graham is compared to who he was. This is what he had to say. This is like a juxtaposition of what Lindsey Graham used to say about Donald Trump versus what he says now. And remember, Donald Trump has not changed.
I think he's a kook. I think he's crazy. I think he's unfit for office.
If you think Trump is bad for the party, I disagree with you.
He's a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot.
Do you think that he is a racist?
Absolutely not. You know how you make America great again? Tell Donald Trump to go to hell.
I think President Trump is good for the party.
All I can say is count me out. Enough is enough. Welcome to Pickens. Thank y'all for coming.
He's being booed at a Trump rally. Lindsey Graham is a coward and an idiot, somebody, again, who should just be relentlessly mocked for the rest of his political career, not taken at all seriously. I'll point to you some other tweets that he said here. This was in February 2016. If Donald Trump is the GOP nominee for president, we will get slaughtered in November 2016, and frankly, will deserve it. He said in that May, if we nominate Trump, we will get destroyed, and we will deserve it. So, again, a tale of two very different Republicans. And the bottom line is this. Liz Cheney is correct. And no conservative, no Republican politician can refute her argument. Donald Trump is indeed a threat to the democratic republic that is the United States in a way that no Democrat ever has been and probably ever shall be. And that's why if you truly love this country and you're an eligible voter, you should put country above party, above person. And the only logical, rational choice to make when it comes to voting is to vote for the Democrat in November 2024. Let me know what you think in the comments.